hopefully, if you will, we're going to have baptism, and while they're getting dressed after the baptism, maybe you'll do a couple more. Do you have a couple more you could do? Oh, I know they can. But that is like old times to me, because Alan used to play the accordion every Sunday. We didn't have a piano player out at Liberty for a long time there, and he furnished all the music, and Lois led the singing, and of course Shannon, she was in the nursery back then, I guess. She was awful small. She didn't know. But it's good to see each one of you, and it's really good to have all the visitors. And I'm glad you came out to witness this baptism. Turn, if you will, to the book of Esther. The book of Esther. I won't preach very long, but I would like to make a point. And the point is that I've read the book of Revelation. How many have read the book of Revelation? Well, the good news is it all turns out all right. I'm glad to find that out. We win. We win. We already saw the score. We win. And I don't... Yeah, it's on. All right. I didn't think my microphone was on, but it is. The point I'm trying to make is this. God is never surprised, and the purposes of God is never foiled. In other words, eternity doesn't depend on you. The results of eternity doesn't depend on you. God can use you, but He doesn't have to have you. You see, God is not disappointed, or things won't turn out right for God if you don't serve God. But you'll miss the blessing, because God's work is going to get accomplished through somebody, even if He has to use a donkey. And I'm living proof of that. No, no, I'm not going to say that. Don't you say it, Wade. But the text that I'm going to read from would be in the second chapter, the fourth chapter of Esther, and it will be the 14th verse. Now, I'm not going to read it right now because I want to bring you up to what is happening. The book of Esther is one of my favorite books. I love the book of Esther. I love the book of Ruth. In the book of Esther, God isn't mentioned one time in the book of Esther. Isn't that amazing that the Holy Spirit would see fit to put a book in the Bible when He is not even mentioned? But God did see fit to do that. There was a king one time by the name of Ahasuerus, a mighty king, and he was married to a woman by the name of Vashti, and she was the queen. One time he was given a great big banquet for all of the lords and all of their wives, and while he was drunk, he sent for his wife Vashti and wanted her to come dance because she was a very beautiful woman, and he was just showing his wife off. That's what it is. And she refused to do it. She said, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to go to that drunken party and show off for those guys. Now, I'm paraphrasing, you understand. The King James doesn't put it exactly in that language, but that's what she meant. I'm not going to do it. Well, it made him mad, and he banished her. She was no longer the queen. Well, he sought for a new queen, and he found a little young maid, most beautiful young lady in the kingdom, but he didn't know that she was a little Jewess. She was a little Jew. Now, this little lady by the name of Esther was raised by her uncle. Her father had died, and her uncle Mordecai raised her, and they were godly people. Well, anyway, she pleased him well, and he married this Esther. Now, Mordecai loved his little daughter, you might say, because he raised her, and every day he would go there to the gate of the city there by the castle, and he would stay there in the gate and visit with people as they came in and out. Well, the king had a right-hand man by the name of Haman. How many has ever read this book before? Okay, y'all are dismissed. You that haven't heard this before, stick around. You want to hear it again? All right. Haman was the king's right-hand man, and I mean he was puffed up. I mean he thought he was somebody. Well, when he would come into the city, everybody would bow and scrape to Haman. That is, everybody except Mordecai. Mordecai wouldn't bow to him. Oh, he didn't like that. He hated Mordecai because that Jew wouldn't bow to him. And so he went home and he told his wife, and his wife ran the family. Now, she might not have run the kingdom, but she ran the family. And he went home crying around, and he said, you know, I'm the king's right-hand man, and he said, everything's wonderful except this Mordecai won't bow to me. And she said, well, why don't you just have him killed? She said, won't you just build a gallows 50 feet tall, 50 cubits tall, which would be 75 feet tall, and have him hanged on it? He said, I believe I will. So he went to the king, and he said, King, he said, now you got a bunch of people here in your kingdom that's really causing a lot of trouble, and I think they ought to be exterminated. You know, another man did that, Hitler. He said, we ought to exterminate them, and he said, I'll even pay to have them exterminated. He said, I'll put so much gold in the treasury if you'll have them exterminated. So the king wrote the law that they would, on a certain day, everybody, it was like open season on the Jews. I mean, you just kill them. The king didn't know that he was married to a little Jew girl. Well, as soon as the king signed that into law, that night he couldn't sleep. And he woke up and he said, well, I can't sleep and I want to read the Chronicles. Now the Chronicles, and there's the Chronicles in the Bible book, the Chronicles, that's nothing more than the records. It's the records of the kings. Well, while he was up one night and he was reading, he happened to read something that he'd forgot about. A few years ago, some evil men had plotted to kill him. Mordecai, the Jew, overheard them, reported it to the right people, and those people were arrested and executed. So he thought, now here this Mordecai saved my life, and I never did reward him for that. I never did recognize him. Now Haman was in hog heaven. He thought, man, I'm getting rid of the Jews. I'm getting rid of Mordecai because I hate him. And so when he come into the palace the next day, the king was sitting there on his throne. He said, hey, Haman, come here. And he said, oh, boy, he's going to honor me again. He said, what would you do for a man that you really want to honor? Well, he just knew he was talking about him. He said, well, king, let me tell you what I'd do. I'd put the royal robe on him. I'd put your very own crown on top of his head. And you know, King, that white charger you ride, your own personal horse? Yeah, I'd put him on that. And I'd have your favorite prince lead him all up and down through the city saying, this is what the king does to those that he wants to honor. King said, good idea. Go get Mordecai, put him on my horse, and you lead him up and down through the city and tell him, hey, now, you guys lied. You didn't read it. Because everybody laughed. See, I know you guys didn't really read the book of Esther, or you wouldn't all laughed about that. But boy, it backfired on him. It really backfired. That's the very guy he was building a gallows for. Well, word got to Mordecai that there was a law signed into effect that on a certain day all of the Jews were going to be exterminated. So Mordecai, and now keep in mind, the king didn't know that Mordecai was a Jew, and he certainly didn't know that he was married to a Jewess. So Mordecai sent word that to Esther that I want to see you. And he was in sackcloth and ashes. I mean, he was in mourning. And here come Esther and said, well, Daddy, what's wrong? Or I don't know if she said Daddy, but that he raised her, and I know that was the sentiment. And he said, that Haman double-crossed us. And he got the king to pass a law that on a certain day, all of us are going to be destroyed. Now, I want to read the text. That was just the introduction. The 14th verse. And he told her, before I read this, let me tell you what. He said, we want you to go to the king and tell him what Haman has done and see if you can get this reversed. Now, that's no easy matter because nobody came into the presence of the king uninvited under penalty of death. That's a good law. I'll tell you, that's a... Not too good. I was joking, huh? But that was the law. Now, if someone would come into the court before the king unannounced, they were dead. Unless he would hold his scepter out, then their life was spared. So let me show you what Mordecai said to her. And she said, well, I'll die if I do that. And he says, for if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? He said, Esther, you don't have any other choice. You go before the king and you may die. But he said, how do you know? But what you were born and you were brought to the place of being queen of the kingdom for such a time as this. So many times when we're saved, we think, well, it's just fire insurance, or we'll hear these beautiful songs and we're ready to go and it's just me and mine and no more else. You know what I'm saying? But you see, every one of us have a circle of influence. Now, I know my mind runs in a track that's usually way off from anybody else. But so many times I've thought, what do you suppose the odds are that you were born in this century? You could have been born any time. First of all, the odds are pretty great you'd never be born. But notice, you happen to be born in this century. Not only this, you happen to be born in the United States of America. Not only this, at this point in time, you happen to be in Oklahoma. Not only that, you happen to be living in Sand Springs, Oklahoma, and you're in this church. You say, so what? You're here for a reason. God doesn't do anything for nothing. When God saved you, He had a purpose for doing that. The Bible in the New Testament very clearly teaches that every last one of us have a ministry. How many realize that? A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people think, well, God saved Jerry and he's the preacher and we have a song leader and we have some ushers and that's it. Oh no. Every one of you are ministers. God saved every one of you for a reason. Now, every one of you have a circle or a sphere of influence. Now, Alan knows people I don't know and I never will ever know. Lois knows people that I don't know and I never will ever know. Some of you men work with men that I'll never have an opportunity to meet. How do you know that God didn't save you and place you in your particular occupation and bring people into your lives for the express purpose that you might witness to them, that you might invite them to church, or that you might get them saved? You stop and think about it. He said, Esther, you don't have any other choice. But now notice something else he said. Now, Esther, if you don't do this, deliverance will come by another way. Now, why do you suppose he said that? Because he was a godly Jew. And he knew that God had made a covenant with Abraham and God was going to take care of his people. But what he's saying is this, Esther, you don't have to do it, but you're going to miss the blessing. He said, I believe God raised you up for this purpose, that you would bring deliverance to God's people. Now, Esther went to the king and she came into his presence. And oh, I can just see that. I imagine those armed guards were standing there with swords drawn, ready to cut her to pieces. But the king saw her, and he raised his scepter. And he said, come here, Esther. And she walked up there and put her hand on top of that staff. He said, what do you want? I'll give it to you up to the half of my kingdom. And she said, well, I want to give a dinner party for you, king. And she said, now I want just you there, and I want Haman there. Ooh, Haman is... Ooh, boy, am I somebody, or what? Our own little private dinner party. So, boy, he runs home and he tells his wife, he says, oh, guess what now, honey? He said, the queen's giving a dinner party tomorrow night just for the king and just for me. Oh, he was puffed up. Boy, he couldn't hardly wait. So when time came, the servants came and said, Haman, it's time to go to dinner. So here he comes, and he comes in there, and they have their big dinner, you know, and she gets through, and the king says, now, honey, what is it you want? She said, well, something I need to tell you. She said, I'm a Jew, and Mordecai's a Jew, and this evil man right here tricked you into signing a law to have me and my daddy that saved your life and all our people executed. Well, I don't know what color Haman was, but when she said that, he was white when it was over. The blood drained out of his face. He was scared to death. And it says, boy, the king was just furious. Called for the guard. They came in, they put a cloth over Haman's face because they didn't even want to see him anymore. They took him out and hung him on the very gallows. Him and his sons hung them on the very gallows that he had built for Mordecai. Now, here's the point I'm trying to make, and I'll close with this. God's job is going to get done. God's going to bless souls right here at Calvary Baptist Church. People are going to get saved right here at Calvary Baptist Church. We're going to baptize people right there at Calvary Baptist Church, with or without you. But how do you know, Christian, that God hasn't brought you here for such a time as this? Because you can reach your friends. You can serve right here at this location and win your friends and be an influence to your friends. Archie, let's sing Amazing Grace. We're going to have baptism. And would this young couple come now and get ready? And we're going to sing Amazing Grace, and then we're going to have baptism, and then Alan's going to, and Lois are going to do a couple more or something. What, would you do that? All right. This will be an invitation. Let's all stand for this. We'll sing 12 verses of Amazing Grace. No, we won't.